This special test assembly helped solve a Loctite mystery, and it was the result of the many of you who commented on my earlier videos and were wrong. First, I'll share the mystery, then I'll explain why I think many of you were wrong. Finally, how it helped me solve the mystery. Here's the mystery. After dozens of tests with Loctite Red 271, I wondered why 1 plus 2 equaled 2. Here's what I mean. These are 3 nut and bolt test assemblies. The first assembly is a nut torqued onto a bolt without thread locker. The second is a nut loose on a bolt with thread locker. And the third is a nut on a bolt with both torque and thread locker. I assembled 4 more samples of each assembly and let the thread locker cure for 24 hours. I then measured and recorded the torques needed to break the nuts loose and averaged the results. I figured that adding the average break loose torques of only torque and only Loctite would be approximately equal to the average break loose torque of both Loctite and torque. So 9.3 plus 21.9 should have approximately equaled to 31.2 foot-pounds. But the break loose torque of Loctite plus torque was only 21.3 foot-pounds. Why? We'll get back to that. Now, why I think many of you were wrong. Dozens and dozens of comments stated that my earlier videos, where I tested the adhesive strength of thread lockers with the nuts loose on the bolts, were useless, because the nuts needed to be torqued and compressed onto the bolts for proper curing. I never came across this in all of my research. The only 2 requirements for anaerobic adhesive curing I came across was 1. Contact with metal, and 2. In the absence of oxygen. So I conducted an experiment. I used these zinc-plated mending plates, applied 2 drops of red Loctite 271 thread locker, and torqued the nuts to 15 foot-pounds to compress the thread locker. 5 samples were assembled. Additionally, samples were assembled with only the weight of the top plate compressing the thread locker similar to a loose nut on a bolt. 5 samples were assembled, and all were cured for 5 days. I conducted pull tests on the non-compressed samples, but wasn't able to on the torqued and compressed samples because they all easily fell apart when I removed the nuts and bolts. The thread locker was much thicker on the non-compressed samples as compared to the very thin and weak layers on the compressed samples, probably due to squeeze out. So, I dreamt up another experiment. I assembled a special assembly, a nut torqued to 11 foot-pounds against another nut. The Loctite was allowed to cure for 24 hours. I then loosened the bottom nut to release the tension or preload, and the break loose torque was only 15.7 foot-pounds, much lower than the earlier 21.9 foot-pound average of the untorqued assemblies, disproving the theory that torquing was required for proper curing of thread locker. Then a light bulb went off in my head. Plugging the result into the equation, the total came out to 25 foot-pounds. Remember, the average break loose torque earlier was 21.3 foot-pounds, a difference of only 3.7 foot-pounds. I was onto something. I assembled more test assemblies, torqued with thread locker and against another nut, and after 24 hours of cure time, the average break loose torque was 14.3 foot-pounds. Inserted into the equation resulted in 23.6 foot-pounds, which is only 2.5 foot-pounds greater than the actual torqued assemblies. So in my mind, torquing the nuts on bolts in real-life applications squeezes the Loctite out from the contact surfaces. And specifically for 3/8x16 zinc-plated fasteners torqued to 11 foot-pounds, the resulting adhesive strength would be about 65% of Loctite on an untorqued or loose nut. Mystery solved, at least in my mind.